Good afternoon. I was just sitting in my chair, just finishing a meditation and thinking that how I've always been an inner directed person in a world that is outer directed. Everything, all our education, our schooling, our culture, our parental expectations are all outer directed, and how that was always at a conflict of being inner directed, looking within for accomplishment, for purpose, not looking without. In other words, being a human being instead of a human doing. And it's didn't really bother me. I just noticed, well, a little bit different because I had this inner focus. And sometimes, most of the time, almost, in fact, all the time, it's at the detriment for my outer directedness, for my achievements, accomplishments, as most judge and see them by the things that you do, the things that you so-called accomplish. Now, I was always able to do the minimum. I was able to get through school, which served me well because that was my livelihood. Teaching at university became my livelihood. But the large accomplishments, in fact, large accomplishments, I've never owned a home. I've never entertained, I never wanted to, and I've never been in a position, quite frankly, where I could. 4 years ago, I bought my first new car. So that must have been 67 or 68 years old, first new car. And I got a new car because I had a new wife. And it seemed the right thing to do. But outer directed accomplishments, other than, of course, getting my degrees. And it's a little bit ironic because it was through self-development that I was able to accomplish my goals as far as education, because it interests me. It was the only outer thing, other than the surfing, water sports, being outside in nature. But those are just aspects of being, not doing. Even surfing is being with the ocean, being with the sea, the waves, the winds, the condition, the sun, the motion. And very early on being inner directed, I started to see that patterns of life, but not the patterns that we judge by the outside. I'm fit, I'm not fit, I'm young, I'm old, I'm rich, I'm poor. These are the observations of the outside world. And understandably, most focus, most valued, most societal driven, valued achievement is outside directed. But I started very young, I started to see patterns in life. Subtle patterns of life that for most go unnoticed, which defy most of our normal perceptions of logic, cause and effect, space and time. And through an understanding of these hidden patterns, I was able to see the world in a different way, with an insight to perceive the truth that are unfolding in front of my eyes. The truth is that we're of greater stuff. There's a magic, a mysticism, a sacred within. And it unfolds in patterns around us. And it gives you a certain amount of poise to see these unfolding truths. You're poised. There's a contentment that doesn't really jive with the outside world. The true truth, I like that, the true truth of reality unfolding around us, giving us an advantage on the world so that we can make the right decisions that invariably, I'm trying to read and paraphrase my own words, that invariably will lead to infinitely successful results. In other words, perceiving the subtle workings of life that can lead to great accomplishment, success, and happiness in life. In the sense of happiness that can't be taken from you because it's generated from inside. So this ability to see that there was more to life than and the devoting, being a human being took a devotion and a sacrifice of some of the things that other outer directed people find so dear. That really is what we're here to, why we're here in most people's minds, is to accomplish and gain material things. But none of that had much currency with me, ever. And of course, I kind of got used to it, accepted it. And I must say that I am a man without regrets. I've lived a life with countless mistakes. And yet, yesterday's mistake somehow has become today's success. Because as I sit here looking at you, and as today was very retrospective, and that's what prompted this sharing, is to look back over my life and to see the wrinkles, to see the pimples, to see the errors of my way, to see the price I paid. And still say, I sit in front of you with absolutely no regrets. So this kind of inner directed or outer directed, are you a human doing or a human being? And I was almost choiceless in the matter of life seemed to be a process of being, a process of becoming, instead of a process of reacting. And I was looking at two words that kind of share this. Now, when I look at the traditional compel and impel, now, because we're trained, we spend much more, most of us, it's outside forces that seem to be beyond our control. And the word compel for most people means that you have to do something, and the force behind compelling you is outer directed. So this compelled is generally seen as a much, even expressed in the dictionary, as a much stronger word. You must do something. Outer forces are demanding that you do something. And whereas impel is inner, some desire, something from within, some drive, some power. Life itself, as I see it, comes from within. Impel, which is seen as a lesser, as a weaker word. Compel. Impel. Impel is just listening to yourself. It can't be that important. Or compel. Oh my goodness, it's the outside looking in. So it's a question of, do you live your life or does life live you? And I made the choice long ago. Well, it was choiceless. That I wanted to live life. I didn't want life to live me. I didn't want life to lead me. I wanted to lead my own life. And early on, I understood that almost everything was beyond my purview. Without I can't influence. I can't change. And it only fortunately I was inner directed, and I knew that this is the arena that work could be done. This inner work was within the realms of possibility, where the outer work just seems, just is. I almost said what Trump just said, it is what it is. And, I got to agree, it is what it is. But going back to compel and impel, I always found impel to be a much stronger word than compel. I mentioned before about being a rebel. Tell me to do something, no why. Ask me to do it, I'll move heaven and earth. And I'll do everything possible that I can to do it. Especially if it's a pure deed. If it's an impure deed, well, all bets are off. But ask and tell. And ask seems to be a weaker position than tell. But in my book, in this inner directedness, ask is a much stronger word than tell. Impel, self-generated, coming from within, is a lot more powerful, more meaningful than compel, coming from the outside. So we're inner directed. Now, inner directed, one of the consequences, one of the unavoidable consequences of being inner directed is to begin process. First, you're processing what you're experiencing from within. You need to process it because you have no way to qualify or quantify, because it's not measurable, and it's beyond the scope of normal discourse. So you don't have any tools, outer generated tools. You can't do anything. Truly, you have to be it. But what appealed to me, what it was supported, that I was onto something with this focusing within, is I could work on myself. I'm a better man today than I was yesterday. And I'll be a better man tomorrow than I am today. This is my mantra. And this is something that I can accomplish. Or at least my efforts might yield some results. Whereas no matter how hard I try, I can have very little impact on what's going on outside of me. All I can try to do is be the best man that I can be, and that's my contribution to the general well-being. I'm not adding to the crap. That's the goal. I'm not adding. Just trying to be an oasis in the desert. A little bit of calm when I can walk by somebody and they might get the smile, they might smile, they might get the weirdest kind of perception about, they might turn around and look. But this is my contribution by being in a state of equanimity, by not imposing my presence, at least intentionally, not demanding, not making demands of the world, because I'm completely engrossed in the inner experience. Living a life, living my life, not letting my life live me. So we're getting one of the consequences, one of the beauties, one of the beautiful things about contemplation, particularly contemplation of the inner world. You start to see that you begin a process of awakening is the one that was most valuable to me. How to begin, when to begin, what to do, how to gauge the process, how to direct the process. I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to get there. And the process is this experimentation, this finding of your way there. Once someone asked me to define Zen, and I just came out, the quickest way home. And that's been my experience. And particularly, if you've listened to me at all, particularly when I gave up the rigors, any expectations of Zen, gave up, relaxed, then life came to me. Nowhere to go. It's all here. So this process, and I was pretty single-mindedly on the process. I wanted to awake. I wanted to be a realized being, a realized human being. Any of the trappings of the doing were long ago dismissed. You do what's necessary to maintain the physical form. You do what's necessary to comply with the forces that you don't want to be in jail. At least I didn't. We're all in kind of a prison most of the time anyway. We're in a prison if life is living you. That's a prison. If you're living in life, you're living life. You could be your body could be confined. You could be locked up. But you're much more free because you're living your life than all the rest out there that are letting life lead them. In fact, they don't even know there's an option or an alternative. And all of us go through these phases as we develop ourselves, as we come back time and time again, as we make mistakes. And someday we start to perhaps learn from our mistakes. And if we can't learn from our mistakes, we can start through forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for our transgressions. Forgiveness is the key, and you cannot forgive anyone without forgiving yourself. Everything has to come here, every meaningful thing, anything of any import, as I see it, has to come here before it has any value, before there's anything to be given out there. So today I was talking about these got involved in the processes and started. This is part of the training of the mind. I train my mind to process information. As I always say, find, sort, file. And sort means discard most of it, right? Most of it is rubbish. Find information, sort it, store what's been that survived the rigors of examination. And I was very rigorous about the standards that I kept for evaluating. And this is where my mind found where I was able to give my mind a job, a useful, for me, a useful niche, a useful definition, a useful job description. And if you keep the mind busy doing something that's useful, rather than the busyness that comes from just adding to the problem. The mind is not the problem. It took me years to discover that mind was not the problem. It wasn't thinking that was the problem. It was first believing that thinking had anything to do with what's really going on in life. Like thinking would give you any kind of solution or answer any of the ultimate questions. That's not its purpose, although it wants to assume it heavily invested, the ego heavily invested in convincing you, tricking you, fooling you. That its job, that's the job description, to direct, to answer your questions, to decide for you what you should do or what you shouldn't do. None of those things work. So my process was first get the mind to do something. Now my mind, if I've lost something, I misplaced something, I just had been wearing a ring, and somehow I noticed that it feels like it's still there, but I noticed the ring was gone. So last night was an example. I noticed when I thought, I could feel like it's there, but it's not there. Where is it? And yesterday was repotting plants, so that I knew that probably it's easy that either I buried it in my 3 transplanted plants, which I was hoping I didn't, because that would mean digging them up, replanting them anyway. I bought 3 nice plants, and I bought a nicer container, and I changed the soil, and I fertilized, and this was yesterday, and the ring's gone. So when something's missing, my mind will, this is something I've allowed it to try to resolve. So I went downstairs, turned on the garage light, I have the plant supplies, the things I need to replant in different containers. I opened the first container I looked in. There's the ring. And this was all just letting my mind do it without, I didn't interfere. I didn't get in the way of my mind. So this process was the process. And because I recognized early on that ego and mind, although we think it's the same, they're able to separate. You can discard the ego. Keep the mind. Thank God. It's one of our few tools in our arsenal. Keep the mind. But just learn. First, I had to go through a process of a gentle process. Anything to work for me has to be done gentle. I don't do well with brute force, with willpower or won't power. So this softer. First thing I had to do is learn to see how ridiculous the mind was. This is the monkey mind, and to laugh at myself. Laugh at my mind. And then this was part of the process of taming my mind. And we're talking about process here. This is taming it, giving it something to do, paying less attention to it, ignoring it. And eventually I could quiet it. It was just as noisy, actually, but what made it quiet was I was able to ignore it, not to focus on it. That's where the quietness came from. And I was looking for clarity, which was supposed to come from silence, and silence the mind. This was the process that I was on because I wanted clarity. I didn't even know what clarity was, but it didn't matter. I wanted it. I didn't know. I thought at first I wanted to see clearly. Then I started to think clearly. No, none of these things have to do with the nature of the clarity that I was in the process of this finding. It just eluded me. So then I started noticing that process leads to transition. Transition is a change. I could change. I changed the way my mind behaved. I changed how I saw the world. I changed judging myself or anyone else. This is transition. And forgiveness, there's an element of giving up its desires or goals or focus. Forgiveness. These are all part of the process. And it becomes a transition taking you from point A to point B, actually, that you're never went anywhere, you're just here. So this transition ultimately would lead to transformation. And that's the whole point of today's talk. This 29-minute build-up has been to take a process, to go on a process, instead of going on a journey, to transition, move from point A to point B, change, to transformation. And transformation was awakening, with the awakening process. And there's a certain point of being awakened that you are awake and you can't go back to sleep. But the past tense, awake, the proper is the gerund, awakening. It's a continuing process, transition, transformation. None of those things ended with, in fact, really, for the most important ways, it just was the beginnings. But we always talk about permanent and impermanent awakening, abiding and non-abiding awakening. What's the separation? Well, non-abiding, impermanent means that you can backslide. You can go back to the egoic state. Permanent, abiding, there's no going back. You've reached this point of no return. But you just don't end there and go, and start spewing wisdom, enlightening the masses. No. You're awakened to awakening. That's the key. You're aware. You're awake through the process of transition to transformation. And then when you get to this state, you realize that awakening, it's a continuity, continuous, never-ending, infinite process. Otherwise, how boring. What would be left? And once you're awakened, there's so much. Then you discover awakening. Then you can embark on the journey of awakening. The journey with no destination. The journey with no end. The endless journey of awakening. This is the transformation. This is the true transformation. To become aware of the process of the transition, of the transformation to the state of continuous and continually awakening. How beautiful is that? There's no goal. There's no accomplishment. There's no separating just the awakened person. The person that awoke to awakening is a normal state. Nothing special. Nothing different. It's the normal condition. What's not normal, or what's extraordinary in this ordinary evolution, is that it's even possible and problematic.